My name is Michael Carter. I'm 39 years old, and until last year, I genuinely believed that if you became indispensable at work, your employer would never let you down. Looking back now, I realize how naive that sounds. For almost 11 years, I worked for a commercial construction company in Denver called Summit Ridge Development. We weren't the biggest contractor in Colorado, but we handled large commercial projects, office buildings, distribution centers, medical facilities, and occasionally government contracts. By the time everything fell apart, I was senior project manager, responsible for overseeing projects worth hundreds of millions of dollars. People often assume construction is about concrete, cranes, and blueprints. It isn't. It's about deadlines. Every missed shipment, every delayed inspection, every subcontractor who fails to show up can cost tens of thousands of dollars before lunch. Most people only see the finished building. They never see the endless chain of decisions holding everything together behind the scenes. That was my job, keeping the entire chain from breaking. When I first joined Summit Ridge, I was 28 years old and eager to prove myself. I had recently left a much smaller contractor after realizing there was no room for growth there. Summit felt different from the beginning. The company was growing fast. Everyone seemed motivated. The executives knew employees by name. If someone stayed late to solve a problem, people noticed. Or at least that was how it appeared. Back then, my direct supervisor was Thomas Reed. Tom had spent over 20 years in commercial construction and had the reputation of being demanding without being unfair. He never wasted words. If you did something well, he'd nod once and move on. If you made a mistake, you heard about it immediately. Oddly enough, people respected him because of that. You always knew where you stood. During my second month at the company, one of our largest projects nearly collapsed after a steel supplier declared bankruptcy halfway through construction. Most of the management team panicked. Everyone blamed someone else. Tom simply walked into my office, dropped a stack of supplier contracts on my desk, and said, "Figure out another way." That was it. No instructions. No safety net. For 3 straight days, I barely slept. I called suppliers across 4 different states, negotiated emergency pricing, reworked delivery schedules, moved crews between job sites to avoid expensive downtime. By Friday afternoon, we had secured enough material to keep construction moving. The project finished only 6 days behind schedule instead of 3 months. On Monday morning, Tom stopped by my office. He looked at the updated project schedule for a few seconds before saying, "You're good under pressure." Then he walked away. It was probably the shortest compliment anyone had ever given me. For some reason, it meant everything. From that point forward, I chased that feeling. Every difficult project, every impossible deadline, every emergency call at 2 in the morning. I wanted to be the person everyone depended on. Over the next decade, I slowly became exactly that. Whenever a project started falling apart, executives called me. Whenever subcontractors threatened to walk away, I handled the negotiations. Whenever clients demanded impossible changes halfway through construction, I somehow made it work. People around the office started joking that I could keep a building schedule alive using nothing but coffee and stubbornness. Maybe they weren't entirely wrong. My personal life paid the price. My wife, Rachel, tried to be supportive for years. She understood that construction wasn't a 9-to-5 job. But eventually, every missed anniversary, every canceled vacation, every birthday I spent answering work calls instead of sitting with my family started adding up. One evening, she asked me a question I couldn't answer. "If Summit disappeared tomorrow," she said, "what would you have left?" At the time, I laughed. I told her she worried too much. Today, I think about that conversation almost every week. Because she wasn't asking about the company. She was asking whether I still had a life outside of it. The honest answer was no. Some people collect hobbies. Others build friendships. I collected successful projects. My office wall was covered with framed photographs of buildings I'd helped complete. Every picture reminded me of another impossible deadline we'd somehow survived. I looked at those photographs with more pride than I ever admitted out loud. Then came the Riverside Medical Center project. It was the largest contract Summit Ridge had ever won. Nearly $300 million. 5 interconnected buildings. A 28-month schedule. Hundreds of subcontractors. Thousands of workers rotating through the site. If we delivered on time, Summit would become one of the most respected construction firms in the region. If we failed, it could cripple the company financially. Naturally, they gave the project to me. For almost 2 years, Riverside became my entire life. I arrived before sunrise, left after dark. Sometimes I drove home only to return 4 hours later because concrete pours couldn't wait until morning. My daughter Emma once asked why I always smelled like wet cement and diesel fuel. I joked that it was the smell of paying the mortgage. She laughed. I did too. But inside, something about that answer bothered me. During the final 6 months of Riverside, I practically lived inside a temporary office trailer beside the construction site. Every morning began exactly the same. Safety briefing, schedule review, material deliveries, inspection reports, budget updates. By noon, there was always a new crisis. A shipment delayed by weather. An electrical contractor asking for additional payment. An architect changing specifications after installation had already begun. The work never actually ended. It only changed shape. Still, I loved solving those problems. There was satisfaction in watching complete chaos slowly become organized. When Riverside officially passed its final inspection, the client sent a letter praising our entire management team. The CEO personally shook my hand during the celebration dinner. He even joked that I probably knew every bolt inside the building by name. Everyone laughed, including me. A month later, rumors started spreading through headquarters. Our vice president of operations planned to retire before the end of the year. It was one of the highest positions in the company. Whoever replaced him would oversee every major construction project across 3 states. I never openly campaigned for the role. I didn't have to. People kept bringing it up for me. You've already been doing half that job. No one knows the projects better. If anyone deserves it, it's you. Even Tom seemed confident. During one quarterly review, he looked over my performance reports, closed the folder, and simply said, "Keep doing exactly what you're doing." Why? Because people upstairs are paying attention. That sentence stayed with me. Not because it guaranteed anything. Because after 11 years, for the first time, I allowed myself to believe all those sacrifices had actually been leading somewhere. I started imagining what life might finally look like. Fewer emergencies. More strategic planning. Better salary. Enough stability to take Rachel on the vacation I'd postponed 3 different times. Enough time to attend Emma's high school graduation without checking my phone every 15 minutes. For once, the future seemed clear. I had no idea that while I was busy planning my next chapter, someone else had already written it for me. The announcement came on a Tuesday morning. Nobody officially said what the meeting was about, but after 11 years in the company, you learn to recognize certain patterns. Executives don't schedule mandatory meetings with every department unless something important is about to change. People stop pretending to work. Small groups gathered near the coffee machines. Phones buzzed constantly. Everyone had a theory. Around 9, my assistant, Karen, stepped into my office carrying 2 cups of coffee. She smiled as she placed one on my desk. "You look nervous." "I've been through enough executive meetings not to expect good news." She laughed. "Come on. Everyone knows they're announcing the new vice president today." I looked back at the construction schedule open on my monitor. "Maybe." She folded her arms. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Act like you don't know." "I honestly don't." Karen rolled her eyes. "Michael, you've been running projects bigger than anyone else in this company for years. Half the executives already ask for your opinion before making decisions." "That doesn't mean anything." "It should." I smiled politely, but deep down I wanted to believe she was right. Not because of the title, because I wanted to feel that all those years had actually mattered. At exactly 10 o'clock, nearly every office employee gathered inside the conference hall. The CEO spent almost 15 minutes talking about growth, expanding into neighboring states, improving efficiency, and preparing the company for the future. I barely heard any of it. I kept waiting for the announcement. Finally, he smiled. "As Summit Ridge enters its next phase, we need leadership capable of taking this company even further." Something about the wording immediately felt strange. Not leadership. Leadership capable. He continued, "I'm pleased to introduce our new vice president of operations." There was a short pause. "Brian Lawson." The room erupted into polite applause. For several seconds, I honestly thought I had heard the wrong name. Brian stood up from the second row wearing an expensive navy suit and the kind of confident smile people practice in front of mirrors. He couldn't have been older than 33. He had joined Summit only 8 months earlier as Director of Business Development. Before that, he worked in corporate consulting. Not construction. Consulting. As applause continued, I noticed something else. Several executives looked toward me, not with excitement, with caution, almost sympathy. The CEO raised his hand. I also want to thank Michael Carter, whose operational knowledge will be invaluable during the transition. Transition. I already knew what that meant before he finished speaking. Michael will work closely with Brian over the next several months to ensure a smooth transfer of project oversight. There it was. Not a promotion, not recognition, a handover. I sat perfectly still while everyone around me applauded. Inside, something simply shut off. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Mostly I felt embarrassed. Not because I had lost the position, because I suddenly realized everyone else had expected me to get it too. Karen found me 20 minutes later standing alone outside the building. You okay? I stared across the parking lot. I've had better mornings. This makes no sense. I guess it makes sense to someone. She shook her head. They're making you train him. I noticed. Are you actually going to do it? I thought about the question. What choice did I have? Walking away immediately would only confirm whatever story they had already prepared about me. I'll do my job. She looked disappointed. I knew you'd say that. That afternoon, I was called into Tom Reed's office. The same office where, years earlier, he had handed me impossible problems and trusted me to solve them. Now he looked uncomfortable. He closed the door before sitting down. I know today wasn't easy. No. It was an executive decision. So I've heard. He leaned back in his chair. Brian brings a different perspective. On construction? On business? I waited. He continued. The industry is changing. I couldn't help asking. When was the last time Brian managed a commercial job site? Tom hesitated. That's not really his role. So what's mine? He sighed. Michael. No, seriously. I leaned forward. What exactly am I supposed to be now? He looked away for a second. You know these projects better than anyone. I do. And Brian needs someone with your experience. So I build the systems. And he gets the authority. Neither of us spoke. After several seconds, Tom finally said something that stayed with me far longer than he probably intended. Sometimes companies make decisions that aren't about performance. It wasn't an explanation. It was an admission. That evening I met Brian for the first time as my new boss. He walked into my office carrying a tablet and smiling like someone starting the first day at a dream job. Michael. Brian. I've heard incredible things about you. I'm sure you have. He either ignored my tone or genuinely didn't notice it. I'm excited to learn how everything works. That sentence bothered me more than it should have. Not because he wanted to learn, because someone had already made him responsible for things he clearly didn't understand. Over the next several hours, I explained project scheduling software, contractor coordination, permit sequencing, inspection requirements, change orders, procurement timelines, and risk management. Brian took notes constantly. He asked intelligent questions. He wasn't stupid. That actually made the situation worse. Because I quickly realized he wasn't pretending. He honestly believed he could learn 11 years of experience in a few weeks. The following morning, I decided to test something. I opened the Riverside Project Archive. Let's say you're managing a hospital expansion. Brian nodded. A structural inspection fails 2 days before concrete is scheduled. Okay. The subcontractor insists the issue isn't serious. Right. The client wants the schedule maintained. He smiled. I'd call another inspector. Good. And while waiting, I'd move the concrete crew to another section. Which section? He looked at the plans. This one. I shook my head. Why? Because electrical rough-ins haven't passed inspection yet. He frowned. Okay. Then this area. Steel hasn't been delivered. He looked again. What would you do? I answered immediately. I'd postpone the pour 24 hours, shift the framing crew to Building C, renegotiate equipment rental, notify the hospital's facilities department before they heard rumors, and have legal review every communication from the subcontractor. Brian stared at me. How did you figure all that out so fast? I didn't. I closed the file. I've lived through almost the exact situation. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, Can I be honest? Sure. I don't think I would have caught half of those problems. I appreciated the honesty. I really did. But it also confirmed my biggest fear. The company had promoted someone who still needed to ask basic operational questions. 3 days later, another change quietly appeared. I was removed from the weekly executive planning meetings. No explanation. No email. I only noticed because the calendar invitation disappeared. At first, I assumed it was a mistake. Then procurement reports stopped arriving. Budget approvals started going directly through Brian. Project updates that had always landed on my desk suddenly bypassed me completely. Nothing dramatic, just small changes, one after another, like someone slowly erasing my role without officially saying so. Karen noticed it too. She walked into my office one afternoon carrying a stack of documents. They sent these to Brian first. So, they've always gone through you. Apparently not anymore. She lowered her voice. Something feels off. I nodded. It does. What are you going to do? I looked around the office that had once felt like the center of my career. I honestly don't know. For the first time since joining Summit Ridge, I wasn't solving problems anymore. I was watching them happen from the outside. And somehow, that felt even worse. About 2 weeks after Brian took over, the first real problem appeared. Not the kind executives discuss during polished presentations. A real problem. The kind that costs money every hour it remains unresolved. We were halfway through constructing a distribution center outside Colorado Springs when our primary concrete supplier informed us that one of their production plants had suffered a mechanical failure. Every delivery scheduled for the following week was suddenly canceled. Without concrete, foundation work stopped. Without foundation work, steel erection stopped. Without steel, every subcontractor behind them lost valuable time. One delay had the potential to affect nearly 40 companies working on the project. Normally, situations like that came directly to me. This time they went to Brian. I found out by accident. Karen rushed into my office carrying her phone. Have you seen what's happening? No. They've been in the executive conference room for almost 3 hours. So, no one has called the backup supplier. I frowned. What do you mean no one has called them? They're still debating whether it's worth paying the emergency delivery fees. I stood up immediately. Who's in the meeting? Brian. Finance, procurement, legal, and operations? She gave me a look that answered the question. I walked upstairs without asking permission. The conference room door was partially open. Inside, a dozen people sat around a polished table discussing spreadsheets projected onto a large screen. Brian noticed me first. Michael, I heard about the supplier. We're evaluating our options. I looked at the schedule. How long have you been evaluating? He hesitated. A few hours. A few hours? The finance director spoke before Brian could answer. We're trying to minimize additional costs. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You've already lost more money sitting in this room than the emergency deliveries would cost. Silence. Brian finally asked, what would you recommend? I walked toward the screen. Activate Western Aggregate. The procurement manager frowned. They're more expensive. I know. They're almost 18% higher. And the budget impact. I interrupted him. 1 day of idle labor on that project costs more than the entire price difference. Nobody spoke. I pointed at the schedule. If excavation crews stop tomorrow, steel deliveries have nowhere to go. Another pause. The cranes still have to be paid. I pointed again. Electricians lose their sequence. Again. The inspection schedule slips. Again. The client starts calculating delay penalties. The room became noticeably quieter. Finally, Brian looked around the table. Can someone contact Western Aggregate? No one moved. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I already did. Every face turned toward me. They confirmed availability 20 minutes ago. Brian blinked. You already solved it? I solved it before walking in here. The meeting ended less than 10 minutes later. As everyone left, Brian stayed behind. He closed the conference room door. I owe you a thank you. You don't owe me anything. No. He shook his head. You saved that project. I saved the company from wasting half a day. He looked genuinely frustrated. I feel like I'm always one step behind. I believed him. That was the strange part. Brian wasn't arrogant. He wasn't malicious. He was simply trying to perform a job he had never been prepared to do. Someone else had decided experience wasn't necessary. He was living with the consequences just as much as everyone else. Over the following month, similar situations became routine. A roofing contractor threatened to walk off a project over unpaid invoices. Brian asked me what to do. A county inspector questioned revised fire safety drawings. Brian asked me what to do. A hospital client demanded major design changes after construction had already begun. Again, Brian came to me. Every single time. He always thanked me afterward. He always promised he was learning. But something never changed. When projects succeeded, executives congratulated Brian. When problems appeared, They quietly asked me to fix them. One Friday evening, Karen stopped by my office while I was reviewing change orders. She leaned against the doorway. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Why are you still doing this?" I looked up. "What do you mean? You're solving problems that aren't even yours anymore." I smiled. "Old habits." "No." She shook her head. "It's more than that." I waited. She continued. "They're using you." I wanted to disagree. Instead, I stayed silent. Because deep down I knew she was right. A few days later, I attended a quarterly leadership presentation. Not as a participant, as an observer. Brian stood on stage presenting operational improvements made over the previous quarter. Several slides looked strangely familiar. Very familiar. Because I had created them. Not the presentation. The ideas. The scheduling adjustments. The subcontractor coordination model. The revised procurement timeline. Even the recovery strategy from the concrete supplier crisis appeared almost word for word. No one mentioned my name. Not once. The board applauded. The CEO smiled proudly. One executive even said, "Excellent leadership, Brian." I watched him accept the praise. For a brief moment, he looked toward me. Our eyes met across the room. His smile faded. I don't think he felt proud. I think he felt uncomfortable. After the meeting, he found me near the parking garage. "Michael." I kept walking. "Can we talk?" I stopped. "I should have mentioned your contribution." "You think?" "I'm serious." "So am I." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I didn't build those systems." "I know. I tried bringing your name up during preparation. And they said the presentation should focus on executive leadership." I almost laughed. "So expertise only matters until someone higher up needs credit." He didn't answer. Because he couldn't. That night, I drove home in complete silence. Rachel was sitting on the back porch when I arrived. She handed me a cup of coffee without asking anything. After a few minutes, she finally spoke. "You look tired." "I am." "No." She looked directly at me. "You're disappointed." I sat beside her. "I don't think they ever planned to promote me." She nodded slowly. "I know." "You knew?" "I've known for weeks." "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because you weren't ready to hear it." The words hurt because they were true. She reached for my hand. "Michael, for years you've believed that if you worked harder than everyone else, people would automatically do the right thing. I thought merit mattered. It should." She squeezed my hand. "But companies aren't families." I stared into the darkness beyond our backyard. "No. They're businesses." Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Then she quietly asked, "If another company offered you a job tomorrow, would you actually leave?" I opened my mouth to answer. Nothing came out. Because for the first time in 11 years, I honestly didn't know. I didn't sleep much that night. Rachel's question kept replaying in my head. If another company offered you a job tomorrow, would you actually leave? For years, the answer would have been immediate. Absolutely not. I wasn't just working at Summit Ridge. I believed I belonged there. Now I wasn't so sure. The following Monday started like every other Monday. Traffic, coffee, job site reports waiting in my inbox. But something was different. When I opened my email, I noticed that my access to several project folders had been removed. At first, I assumed it was another IT mistake. It wasn't. Karen knocked on my office door a few minutes later. "You've seen it." "I lost access." She nodded. "So did two other project managers." "Why?" "They're centralizing approvals under Brian." I leaned back in my chair. "So now we can't even review our own projects?" "Apparently not." I didn't say anything. Over the next several days, more responsibilities quietly disappeared. Budget approvals, contract negotiations, client presentations. Every week, there seemed to be one less reason for executives to involve me. The strange part wasn't what they were taking away. It was who kept calling me whenever something went wrong. Site superintendents, engineers, project coordinators, even clients. None of them called Brian. They called me. Not because of my title, because they trusted me. One Thursday afternoon, I received a phone call from the superintendent at the Riverside Medical Center. Although the project had officially been completed months earlier, a section of the parking structure had developed unexpected drainage issues after several days of heavy rain. Nothing catastrophic, but if ignored, it could become expensive. He sounded frustrated. "I've been trying to reach Brian since this morning. No luck." He told me to submit everything through the online portal. I closed my eyes for a second. "Have you?" "3 times. Has anyone answered?" "No." I grabbed my truck keys. "I'll be there in 40 minutes." The problem turned out to be exactly what I suspected. One subcontractor had installed drainage channels using outdated drawings after a late design revision. The repair wasn't difficult. It simply required someone who understood how the entire project had been built. By sunset, we already had a repair plan. On my way back to the office, my phone rang. It was Brian. I heard you went to Riverside. I did. You weren't authorized. I wasn't aware helping a client required authorization. His voice remained calm. Michael, that's not what I mean. Then what do you mean? You should have informed me first. I would have. I paused, but nobody answered. Silence. Finally, he sighed. Can you stop by my office tomorrow morning? The meeting lasted less than 15 minutes. Brian looked exhausted. There were dark circles under his eyes that hadn't been there a month earlier. He closed the office door. I need to ask you something. Go ahead. He hesitated. Do people still come to you before they come to me? I answered honestly. Most of them. He nodded slowly. I thought so. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he surprised me. I don't think I should have taken this job. I looked at him carefully. What makes you say that? Every decision I make. He searched for the right words. Feels borrowed. He looked around the office before continuing. I spend every day trying to catch up to knowledge you've spent 11 years building. I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt sympathy. Another part remembered standing in that conference hall while everyone applauded his promotion. Brian leaned forward. I wasn't told you were the obvious choice. I frowned. What were you told? That the company needed someone who could modernize operations because experienced managers were resistant to change. I almost laughed. So that's the story. I believed it. I know. He looked genuinely ashamed. I'm starting to realize I walked into something I didn't understand. I stood. You didn't create the situation. No. He looked down at his desk. But I'm benefiting from it. That was the most honest thing I'd heard from anyone in management since this entire mess began. A week later, another surprise arrived. An executive recruiter contacted me through LinkedIn. Normally, I ignored those messages. This one was different. A regional construction firm in Utah was looking for someone to oversee large commercial projects across several western states. The salary was better. The benefits were better. The authority was significantly greater. I almost deleted the message anyway. Old loyalty dies slowly. That evening, Rachel found me staring at the email. You still haven't answered? I don't know if I'm ready. She smiled sadly. I don't think you're afraid of leaving. I looked up. What am I afraid of? Finding out they never needed you as much as you needed them. That sentence stayed with me all night. 2 days later, I accepted the interview. I didn't tell anyone at Summit. Not even Karen. The interview took place on a Friday afternoon. There were no complicated presentations. No corporate slogans. No promises about becoming a family. The company's president asked me only one question that really mattered. Tell me about the hardest professional decision you've ever made. I thought about promotions, politics, long nights, broken promises. Then I answered honestly. The hardest decision wasn't solving construction problems. He waited. It was accepting that loyalty and value aren't always the same thing. He nodded. I've seen that happen. 3 days later, they offered me the position. I accepted. Submitting my resignation felt strangely ordinary. No dramatic speeches. No arguments. No celebration. I simply walked into Tom Reed's office, placed the envelope on his desk, and said, I'm leaving. He looked at the letter for a long time before speaking. I was hoping you wouldn't. I know. You've been one of the best managers this company has ever had. I appreciate that. He sighed. I wish things had gone differently. I looked at him. They could have. He didn't disagree. News spread through the office surprisingly fast. People stopped by throughout the day. Engineers, schedulers, site supervisors, administrative assistants. Many of them said the same thing. You were the reason projects worked. I appreciated every word. But I couldn't ignore one uncomfortable truth. Almost none of those people had the power to change what had happened. On my last afternoon, Brian came into my office carrying a cardboard box. I figured I'd help. We packed in silence for several minutes. The framed project photographs came down from the walls one by one. 11 years reduced to a few boxes. As I picked up the last frame, Brian spoke quietly. I think you're making the right decision. I think so too. He looked around the empty office. I don't know how long I'll stay. I believed him. Before leaving, I handed him a notebook. It wasn't company property. It was mine. Over the years, I had written down lessons from every major project. Mistakes, solutions, things no software could teach. He looked surprised. Why are you giving me this? Because someone helped me when I started. He nodded. I won't waste it. I hope you don't. We shook hands. There was no bitterness left. Only acceptance. 6 months after leaving Summit Ridge, I was managing projects across 4 states. The work was still demanding. Deadlines still existed. Problems still appeared every single day. But something had changed. When executives asked for my opinion, they actually listened. When projects succeeded, the people who had done the work received the credit. It wasn't perfect. No company ever is. But it reminded me of something I had forgotten. Respect isn't measured by how many hours you work. It's measured by whether your experience is valued when decisions are made. About a year after I left, Karen called me. You heard the news? No. Brian resigned. I wasn't surprised. And Summit? She was quiet for a moment. They've lost 3 major clients. What happened? Too many experienced people left. I looked out the window of my new office. Construction cranes filled the skyline. New buildings, new teams, new opportunities. For years, I believed the biggest career mistake a person could make was leaving a company too early. I was wrong. Sometimes the biggest mistake is staying after people have already shown you exactly how much they value your work. If there's one thing I hope someone takes away from my experience, it's this. Work hard. Be reliable. Learn everything you can. Take pride in doing your job well. But never confuse being indispensable with being appreciated. Because a company can replace your position in a single meeting. The years you gave them, however, are something you'll never get back.